The time has come. Today we're going to be delving into what may be one of the most bizarre and genre-defying dungeon crawlers I've played to date, though I'm not sure it's even fair to classify it as such. Developed by Attic Entertainment and released only in Germany in 1992, the game will be brought to North American audiences by the legendary Surtech in 1993. Based on the German pen and paper tabletop game The Dark Eye, this title leaned very heavily into the survival aspects of RPG life. Where most other dungeon crawlers of the time were content to add in the requirement for food and call it a day, Realms of Arkania didn't shy away from getting into the nitty-gritty of surviving in an unforgiving fantasy environment. The requirement for food and water is just the start here. There were environmental hazards like bad weather, swamps, flowing rivers, broken bridges, and high mountains. There was the ever-present danger of starvation, dehydration, and disease on the road. To say nothing of the battle within. Your characters had their own personalities, their own fears and worries. Getting your warrior who's afraid of heights to cross over a high mountain, or having your arachnophobic mage cross a spider-covered bridge could lead to disaster when they panic halfway across. Every choice you make has a consequence, and each time you leave the relatively safe confines of the city into the untamed wilderness, you risk it all. The longer your journey, the greater your chances of peril. The tension these survival aspects bring to the game are unforgettable. I came expecting a dungeon crawl, but left feeling like I had just played the love child of Eye of the Beholder and Oregon Trail. It's a weird, obscure mix that when it works amazingly well. It's not all sunshine and rainbows though. This game is pure, unadulterated intimidation for a new player. Probably for a returning player as well. From its insanely complex and obtuse character creation, to the hands-off quest design and frankly baffling gameplay functionality, I spent a massive part of my time with this game confused and lost. Even after completing the game and exploring the world for a few dozen hours, I still feel like there's so much I just don't understand. And that's coming from someone who read the entire game manual and clue book. Yes, naysayers, I did in fact read all the literature this time. The only thing I didn't read was the actual Dark Eye rulebook. As fascinating as that may have been, my manager keeps me on a tight schedule.
Get the video out or you don't get to eat this week.
So I hope you'll join me in exploring the lands of Arkania and discovering its mysteries. The orcs aren't going to stop themselves, and winter is coming. Dress warm and bring food. This game may vaguely look like a Might and Magic style blobber at the quickest glance, and even cites that game as an inspiration, but I can assure you that the way it plays is extremely different. There are moments where this game dips into blobber territory, but from start to finish it's a very unique experience. Even the combat is a very non-standard top-down view. We'll get to that, but let's talk about the biggest hurdle anyone choosing to play this game is going to have: character creation. I don't think anything I've played to date has been as complex as the system on offer here in Realms of Arkania. Sometimes numbers do a better job illustrating a point than just talking, and as a nerd I do love me some stats. Here's some for Arkania. There are 7 positive overarching attributes and 7 negative attributes. There are a whopping 52 skills split into 7 subcategories, 12 possible gods to worship, and a staggering 84 individual spells split between 12 spell schools. None of what any of these things do are well explained, either in the manual or in the clue book. Some are vaguely obvious, whereas others are completely unknowable or weird in ways logic couldn't predict. Let's take weapon skills as an example. That should be obvious, right? Not really. Would you have guessed that a wand is a polearm? I definitely wouldn't have. Well, you can rest assured that a two-handed axe falls into the axe category, right? Nope, that's a two-handed sword, you dummy. Well, what about my blunt weapons then? Is there a category for me? Well, of course. Blunt weapons, like cudgels and hammers, fall into the cutting weapons category. Isn't that obvious? I guess if you hit someone hard enough with a hammer, it is eventually going to cut. And what about those negative attributes? Surely it'll be clear which of those are good to focus on. Well, I mean, fear of heights, claustrophobia, and fear of the undead seems clear at least. But what the hell does curiosity do? Or avarice? Or violent temper? I couldn't tell you. Superstition is far more important than any of them, being as it directly affects magic resistance. The rest seems situational at best, and completely worthless at worst. And this is sort of where the game hits one of its biggest stumbling blocks right out the gate. There are so many skills, which is awesome. I love a complex RPG. But I would say a solid 70% of them are completely useless, or used for like one thing and then never touched again. There are always dump stats in these old RPGs that are there to trick new players into wasting points, but I would argue that the great majority of stats in this game are completely unnecessary. It would be so easy to build your characters in such a way that they're borderline useless in the actual game. And this is unfortunately a game where the stats that do matter a lot. The drive skill, so far as I can tell, had zero use in this game. There aren't exactly a lot of SUVs in the realms of Arkania. Survival, on the other hand, is pretty well necessary to not starve in the wilderness. Reading and writing, similarly, is quite literally necessary to complete the game, as is having some way to unlock doors. If you don't invest a character into locks or a mage into magical unlock, you can absolutely softlock your game. Animal healing and train animals conversely sound cool, but I would be shocked if there is any purpose for them in the game, like at all. I never once had the ability to interact with a wild animal. I can only assume they added so many niche skills in trying to stay faithful to the tabletop game, but there needs to come a point as a developer when you accept that some things are not going to translate well into your video game and make changes accordingly. There is some decent description of each of the skills in the game manual, so that does help, but even so, it's not always clear what skills are going to be necessary when the game actually kicks off. Like, I put a ton of points into treat wounds, treat disease, and treat poison, thinking those would be key for survival. Treat wounds ends up being borderline useless, often causing me to just further injure people I was trying to help.
Whoops.
Even with a high stat investment, at best it might heal a handful of life points. At worst, you'll end up killing your own party members with it. As for disease and poison, never once did I get diseased or poisoned the entire game. Now, to be fair, that may just be luck on my part, as most guides for this game say disease will be a constant worry. And there's apparently a spider cave that I totally missed, which explains the poison. The complexity of your character extends to spellcasters in the game as well. With such a wide variety of spells, it can be overwhelming figuring out what to focus on. Spells required stat investment just like your main stats. And unfortunately, this is one of those games where the names of spells rarely tell you what they do. The completely necessary light spell? It's called Fiat Lux. Your main attack spells? Fulminoctus or Ignifaxis. Open Lock? Foramen is the name, of course.
Many of the spell names are derived from Latin, putoigitur fellum.
And the spells are unfortunately not clearly explained even in the manual, some requiring massive investment just to cast them. If you were trying to do this blind, you might spend the entire game trying to learn a spell that ends up being completely worthless. I think during my character creation, I had about 5 windows open between Google searches, clue books, character guides, and the manual. I recommend you do the same if you want to build a halfway useful party. One final big challenge with your character development is the way the game handles increasing these skills. When you level up, you'll get a handful of skill points to distribute as you see fit. The challenge is you can fail to level up a skill, so you might really need a few more points in orientation or climbing to progress the game, and then just have the game say, "Nah, screw you, RNG says you don't get skill points this level." It could border on insanely unfair too. I would have a run of 5 or 6 skill failures in a row. It's especially frustrating when level ups are not common in this game. By the time I finished, I was only level 5, and 2 of those levels were gained from the final battle. So losing some of those crucial points to RNG is kind of a bummer. Don't think you're gonna grind out levels either. This game handles experience really weirdly, in that the first time you encounter an enemy type, it'll grant like 1,000 experience or something, but every subsequent kill would give like 50. So much less that it's almost pointless to fight the same enemies again. I think some quests were also granting experience on completion, but there's no dialogue confirmation for this, so I might have missed it. All that said, if you can get through the frankly rigorous task of building your party, the gameplay loop of Blade of Destiny is super unique and very enjoyable. And for those that really can't handle trying to figure it all out right away, the game does offer a perfectly playable pre-made party for your adventuring needs. You can even choose to play in novice mode and let the game handle all your leveling for you. I personally do like to control my own character development, despite all my complaining, but the option is there for an easier time. The way the game handles classes is really fun too. There are some common archetypes you would expect, like mages, warriors, and rogues, but more interestingly, there are some races that are just their own class. Like a dwarf is not a race, it's a class. It's a rogue warrior hybrid. There's the Thorwallian, which is sort of a Nord Viking barbarian character. There are even a bunch of different elf races, each comprising their own class with different strengths and weaknesses. I didn't take any elves though, because elves are lame. I think my favorite thing about the classes is that the game refuses to make them gender neutral, often to hilarious effect. A couple are normal, like Hunter and the female variant Huntress, or the Warlock and the Witch. Then there are some really weird ones, like the Dwarf and the Dwarfess, or the Jester and the She-Jester. It seems like when it's in doubt, the game just puts she in front of the word. I don't think I've ever played another game that felt the need to make female warriors into she-warriors. It makes me think of She-Ra and He-Man more than anything else. My cat is no longer my editor. She's now my she-editor. The good news is, despite the labyrinthine character development in this game, the actual gameplay is not as intimidating as it would appear at a glance. You'll find the occasional blobber-style dungeon, and those go just about how you would expect, solving minor puzzles and moving around on a grid map. The dungeons are usually pretty small, and the puzzles are actually really easy in this game, with the exception of one that I'll talk about in the story section. My only real complaint with the dungeons is that the tile sets are really limited. Besides the cities, which are unique, most dungeons are this weird blue walled thing that you'll see a lot in the video. There was one time I found a cave, but otherwise it's all the same. Of note, this game actually has a great auto map, which is always a bonus in grid-based games, and not usually a given in something this old. Outside dungeon exploration, The gameplay loop you'll see for most of the game is more focused on exploring the greater overworld. The focus of the quest here is to wander the lands in search of the titular Blade of Destiny, and that will see you wandering across the entire country chasing down clues, map fragments, and adventure. On the way between the civilized places of the world, you'll need to survive off the land, catching game, finding water, and deciding on how to overcome a whole slew of other issues, both mundane and magical. It's honestly a really good time. I would strongly suggest specializing at least 2 characters into survival. You can always hunt for food and water twice in a day, and if one fails, having a backup scavenger is wise to avoid starvation. Herb gathering is a must as well. Outside providing the ever-helpful whirlweeds for healing, the herbs you get sell for a lot and weigh very little, giving you the cash flow to afford staying in cities and fund your quest. You'll need to keep track of repairing weapons, buying equipment, staying in inns to recover, and paying for emergency rations. Adventuring is not cheap. Outside the routine of staying alive, there are scripted and random encounters as well. And while these situations can just lead to combat, some can be quite interesting in their own right. I remember at one point I was working my way along the edge of the sea when a ship pulled up alongside me. I made the choice to flag down the crew, not knowing if these were friendly sailors or pirates willing to gut me for my supplies. Turns out the ship was piloted by a Thorwallian woman, and she's happy for company to the next port, cutting days off of my travel time for taking the risk to say hello. Making friends and sailing the seas is what adventure is all about. Another time I chose to rest at an old abandoned inn on the side of the road, and was attacked by the undead in the middle of the night for intruding on their space. The game is just filled to the brim with little interactions like this on the road, and while heavily delivered by text, all are just so memorable and charming. You really feel like a group of ragtag adventurers trying to make it in a hostile fantasy world. You can also choose to move around the world by chartering ships to take you from port to port. It's quicker than walking, but not without its own frustrations. Ships run on a pretty rigid schedule, so you can't just pop down to the port and grab a ship to anywhere you like. You have to wait, sometimes days, for a ship to show up, and even then it may not go where you want. You may have to take it and then seek another ship to go further, often needing to spend many nights at the inn while awaiting the next ships. Some villages were completely landlocked and required sailing to reach and to leave, and kraken attacks at sea are not unheard of either. The cities themselves are fairly standard RPG fare. You have a few different types of shops, inns, temples, ports, and homes. My only gripe is that all the buildings, except the temples, look exactly the same, so you won't know if the building you're standing in front of is someone's house or the local tavern until you walk in or check your map. It would have gone a long way to add in signs or something outside the establishments so you know where you're going. While combat isn't really the main focus of Realms, it's certainly here and in no way industry standard. When you enter combat, you're put into a top-down battlefield view, not entirely different from something like Final Fantasy Tactics, only much more simplistic and significantly more clunky. From this screen, all things are turn-based. You can do all sorts of things, from movement to changing weapons, equipping items, casting spells, and the like. How much you could do on a turn was based on action points, which were primarily determined by how over-encumbered your characters were. More shit in your bags will make you less effective, up to the point of not even being able to attack in combat. My mage pretty much always had more action points than my melee fighters, due to not being encumbered by heavy armors and weapons. I will say the combat in this game is easily its weakest point. Both you and the enemies don't really have enough action points to do much on a given turn, so usually it would just consist of swapping blows back and forth in melee. Everything, including you, is really hard to hit, so you could go like 5 turns with no one actually making contact. This is a big problem, especially early on. You could get into combat with one enemy and just watch as you comically surround him and swing away 4-on-1 for a solid minute before ever making a hit. Magic was powerful, but your mana pool was extremely limited, and recovering it in the wild was nearly impossible without potions. You really needed a big, long rest at the end to replenish your mana to full, so magic tended to be saved for big fights. Though I would occasionally nuke an orc out of pure frustration when my melee characters just could not land a hit. The game does have an auto fight mode, and that's what I used in 90% of cases, only really taking over manual control when I wanted to use my casters, or if it was a more difficult boss fight. Fighting manually is just so tedious as the turns are slow, and the mouse controls are so imprecise. The AI for auto fight just comes down to your characters attacking whatever is closest, but it does save the headache of having to select the same attack 20 times in a row. Also, this is a bit of a nitpick, and may actually be more of a DOSBox problem, but all the combat text in this game goes by so fast. Half the time, even in manual mode, I wouldn't know who was landing hits or what was going on because the text is only on screen for like half a second. If you played this on original hardware, let me know if it was always like this. If you do happen to lose a character in combat, it's really wise to just reload your game. While resurrection is possible, it's a nightmare to actually accomplish and completely RNG based. You need to go to the Temple of TSA, make a random donation of money, and then pray for a miracle. The problem is you might donate a few silvers and then have your dude back right away, or donate every cent you have and still not get a resurrection. Like, I don't mind if resurrection is expensive or prohibitive, but the RNG of it is so frustrating. Just give me my goddamned mage back, you bastards. So, this is a pretty free-form experience, even for a 92 dungeon crawler, but the game does start off with a good enough premise, even some nice pixel art to accompany it and get you ready for the quest. Thorwall, a large port city in Arkania, has been in a centuries-long conflict with the Orcs, who hold dominion over the northern part of Arkania. 100 years prior to the events of today, feared warrior Hetman Hygelik, a Thorwallian raider, was pillaging the coastline south of Thorwall. At the end of their successful raid, the Thorwallians returned home, all except Hygelik's ship. He instead went to the Cyclops Isles to have a sword of great power forged. Feeling mighty with his new sword, he pushed into the Orcish lands, a place from which no man had ever returned. He was determined to map the area and prove his worth. Any spoils claimed along the way would just be a bonus. He overestimated his power and underestimated that of the Orcs greatly, and he was never seen again. Those of his party who did return were changed, insane from their ordeal in the Orcish lands. And thus, Hygelik and his mighty sword were buried in an unknown place, somewhere along the Orcish steppes. Back in the current day, a massive Orcish force is gathering on the northern border. United by a powerful chieftain, the South shudders in anticipation of a war they cannot win. None of this matters to us though. We're a small group of adventurers, arriving in Thorwall seeking to make a name for ourselves. We'll get that wish. The journey starts out with pretty well no direction. You're in town and free to do as you wish. I make a detour at the shops to get some good weapons and armor, and of course some food to keep us alive. In the southwestern corner of town, we can offer to help the guards with a bandit problem. This is the first real dungeon in the game, and a great place for a new party to cut their teeth. If you can't conquer this dungeon, it may be time to go back to the drawing board with your party. After clearing the place out, we take our reward money to the tavern where we hear the rumor that the hetman, or leader, of Thorwall is looking for a group of adventurers to help him with an important task. We visit the hetman and he gives us the lowdown. The best chance to get the orcs to retreat is to kill their chieftain, but we can't just kill him. We need to demoralize them. He wants us to recover Hygelik's sword, Grimring the Orc Slayer, and use that to kill the chieftain. Unfortunately, no one knows where the sword is, and it's likely in the Orcish lands. He does give us a lead though. Many descendants of Hygalik's expedition still live across Arkania. He knows the name of one, Isleif Olgerd's son, who lives on the slopes of the northern mountains. With this scrap of information, we head out into the wilds. This particular road is fairly safe, and serves as a good introduction to travel in the game. On the way, we take a ferry to a small village off the beaten path. Here we can find Bjorn. A friendly sort, he gives us tons of leads to follow in the form of names of several descendants and where they live. He's also kind enough to give us a scrap of parchment. He then kicks us out of his house, stating that he's expecting female company. Good for him. Bjorn deserves a win. The parchment comprises 1/9 of a map that will lead us to the Sword Grimring, and this is going to be the formula for the great majority of our quest. Moving village to village, surviving the wilds, and following leads to claim map pieces. You only actually need 7 of the 9 pieces to find the sword, which is a really nice addition for replayability. Moving on from here, we make it to our original destination and talk with Isleif, an old man. He sort of rambles on a bit, but ends up giving us another map piece. You'll find a few map pieces are just handed over, though often this won't be the case and something will be required. I try to breach into the northern mountain range, but find I'm not strong enough to manage the bandit raids and the climbing, so we instead angle back towards Thorwall and then follow the coast north. We come across the unassuming coastal village of Daspada. In trying to find somewhere to rest, it becomes clear this isn't a normal town. Everyone here is either guarding something or trying to cheat you. Before long, we stick our nose in one too many times and find this is a pirate city. We fight our way free and continue up the coast. We find another descendant in Otterge and grab map piece 3. The next few won't be relinquished so easily. The next city down the coast holds another descendant and he holds another map piece, but he's not so willing to give it up. He says only the hetman can make such a demand, and he doesn't believe that we're working for him. We'll need to go all the way back to Thorwall, get a note from the hetman, and then go all the way back up the coast to deliver proof that we work for him. An hour of game time for us, several months off our characters' lives. Ah well, 4 pieces down, 3 to go. The next one is a touch more interesting. After carving our way north through the mountains, we meet with Umbric Sevenstones. He says he can help, but he has a problem. The area is being terrorized by an evil druid. I don't abide any druid that isn't true neutral, and head out immediately to cave in his head. Not far from the city we find the Druid Grove. There's a text event where you can try to sneak up on the man, but I fail miserably and end up getting attacked by about a dozen wolves. The druid himself is luckily pretty passive while we kill his pet wolves, but eventually summons a few harpies to help him, and even a lion of all things. We persevere and successfully restore the balance. In reward for our help, Umbric gives us a letter of introduction. He says we can give it to someone in a distant village for a map piece. 5 pieces down. Moving toward the northern coast, we come to a high bridge that needs to be crossed. Several of my party refuse to do it because they're too afraid. My solution? Blindfold them and then walk them across. This actually works, weirdly enough. I don't know, if it were me, I think not being able to see while crossing the rickety rope bridge would just make me more afraid. We grab another piece of the map from a woman living on a remote island, then head back to the mainland to find the last piece we need. It will be the most involved one yet. We find the woman who held it, but she was robbed by a dark wizard living in a nearby castle. We'll have to go get it if we want it. Finding the castle is easy enough, but it leads to probably one of the most obnoxious dungeons in the game. The first annoyance of this dungeon is that the whole place is several levels deep, and it's completely dependent on illusory walls. There are no indicators for illusory walls in this game, so the whole dungeon just devolves into face humping every single wall until you find the one that lets you through. Maybe there was a skill or a spell that helps with this, but I certainly didn't know it. The second big challenge with this dungeon is that there are hostile mage enemies. Not super deadly, but they can cast Paralyze on your party members. This makes them stop in place, unable to assist you in combat. The problem is that this effect lingers on after combat is done. Resting didn't seem to make it go away, and neither did any of my healing spells. There's a chance it would have worn off eventually, but I was too afraid to take that risk, so I ended up just reloading each time I got the effect. Actually, as I'm writing this, I'm recalling there are healers in town that I never used. They probably could have fixed it. Oh well. I'm sure there's probably some Latin-worded spell that would have removed it, if only I spoke Latin.
2 es brassica.
After killing the mage, we get our final map piece and can start looking for the sword. Very exciting. Turns out it's somewhere in the eastern mountain range. You need to first make it to the city of Skellylen, and then move north through the untamed mountain ranges. Except it's actually winter right now. That's right, despite the graphical display not showing it, we're deep in a snowy winter, and the mountain pass cannot be entered at this time of the year. So, we go to the inn and live there for 3 months. I like to think our party took a nice, long, and well-deserved Christmas break here. We've been wandering up and down the coasts and across the country for several months at this point. A nice holiday was overdue. Spring arrives, and the pass is finally broken open. There are a ton of climbing checks here. Having a bunch of rope with you helps a lot with this. After crossing the bulk of the mountains, we have to pass a giant swamp, which unfortunately causes us to lose half of our equipment. I luckily didn't lose anything too important, but notably my mage lost his boots. We still have another mountain range to get through before reaching civilization. My poor mage is going to be dieharding it for quite a while. We do eventually follow the map and find a crumbling ruin in the mountains. We explore for a while, constantly getting injured by tripping over debris and having beams and stones fall on our heads. On the second floor, we can come to the game's hardest puzzle. There are 2 mirrors, each with a lever next to them, and a locked door in between. Pulling the levers does nothing. What you need to do is utilize the otherwise useless split party function to split your group in half. Half the group at each lever. That's not the end of it though. You don't just pull the levers together. Instead, you need to attempt to merge the party when standing in the correct location, wherein you'll get a notification that you can't join up, but that you can shake hands through the mirror. Now you can attempt to pull the levers through the mirror, so each party must pull the other side's lever for them. It's very weird and super counterintuitive. The rest of the dungeon is a lot more forgiving, mostly just forcing you to fight a bunch of the undead. They're pretty easy to beat and more of an annoyance than anything. At the lowest point, we come to none other than Hygalik himself, though he's not looking so great after 100 years of zombification. He says he was in fact not killed in the northern lands, but instead cursed by the gold he stole. Sucks for him. He's actually super helpful and offers us Grimring for nothing, hoping it will help him lift his curse if it's used for good. There's never any indication that this is the case, but regardless, we have the sword and are just about ready to destroy the orcish threat. And here's where my playthrough just about ended. See, to stop the orcs, you need to know where they are, and to know that, you need to find a specific cave. I know where the cave is. We actually should have found it on the way here according to the clue book, but I never got the pop-up to explore it. I tried crossing through the mountains over and over in hopes of finding the cave, but after a couple of hours I was starting to lose hope. I thought maybe my game was bugged out. It turns out it may have been the character I had leading my party. In what may be one of the most infuriating design choices in any blobber I've ever played, it turns out that the only member whose skills are ever being calculated when you travel are your leaders. My leader is a warrior with the navigational skills of a brick, so with him in the lead, I kept missing the cave entrance and just repeatedly getting launched into the swamp. As soon as I put my huntress with a high orientation skill at the front of the group, I found the cave in minutes. The whole point of a blobber is that your party is an amorphous blob. It's wild to me they decided to make it work that way. It's honestly almost unforgivable from a game design perspective. Anyway, now that we've found the cave, it's just a matter of fighting a few battles, opening a chest, and grabbing the Orcish plans. They detail the location the army will form, and the date of the attack. We head to the coordinates on the paper, and then realize we are a solid 2 years early. In a small act of mercy, the game gives you the option to advance time to that of the attack, which is nice from a gameplay perspective, but I have to imagine my party has gone quite insane living in the Orcish wastes for 2 years. Could we not have gone home and then come back? Ah well. Once the time of the invasion arrives, we get a big wall of text that amounts to us and the Orcs agreeing to settle the war with a one-on-one fight. Our champion versus the Orcish chieftain. Winner takes Thorwall. Do we have the diplomatic clout to give them Thorwall? I guess it doesn't matter, if we lose we'll be dead. I choose Big Ounce to represent the party, mostly because he's the only one with points and swords. The fight is actually really easy. The Orc chief can barely land a hit, and I do massive damage with Grimring. In another sort of weird design choice here, if you use anyone else in your party, the Orcs will get mad and attack you with their full army. And yet the game still makes you go through their turns each round of combat, and auto-fighting is disabled for this battle. So the whole thing is just skipping 5 turns, having your main guy do 1 attack, and then repeat until the Orc dies. It's very stilted and awkward. You can't even use magic in this fight, so I don't know why they force you to cycle through your party like that. Anyhow, once he dies, each of my party members gains 2 levels. Cool, especially as your characters can be imported into the sequel. But again, it's just so stilted as the leveling is a very slow process. So you finish the final fight, and then sit there for half an hour distributing your stats. It's just weird. Once you finally finish up with all that, the game ends with some pretty rocking pixel art. We return in victory to the Hetman, and he gives us the reward of 50 gold pieces for our trouble. Are you kidding me? 50 bucks to single-handedly recover his culture's most prized artifact, stop an Orcish invasion, and save the civilized world. All over the course of several years. Remind me never to get a job in Thorwall. Bunch of cheapskates. So, I think a lot of this review is going to come off as negative, or at least mixed, and while I stand by what I've said, my experience really wasn't a negative one. I think more than anything, I can see what this game was going for. And while I think the reach may have exceeded its grasp by a far margin, I can get behind the vision. I think my biggest disappointment with the title is how they sell it with this great, complex character creation that has deep customization and specialization options. But in-game, so many of the skills and talents aren't utilized more than a couple of times, or at all in some cases. That disappointment sort of taints what would otherwise be a solid survival fantasy dungeon crawler. It almost feels like the creation hyped me up for a super complex RPG that just never materialized. In all fairness to this title, I will caveat my feelings here with the acknowledgement that this is part 1 of a 3-game trilogy. You import your party game to game, so it could very well end up that these useless skills come into effect in the next 2 games. Final judgment will have to wait until I've reviewed the whole series, which I of course intend to do. Ironically, the combat and dungeon crawling is probably the game's weakest point, but I found that to be mostly forgivable. While those parts weren't super enjoyable, they were serviceable and didn't really detract from the experience. They were sort of just there. The game was at its absolute best when you are wandering the countryside, plucking at tenuous leads, tracking down ancestors, and gathering map pieces, all the while pitting your group against the many threats of living in a medieval fantasy world. It was such a unique and memorable vibe that's rare in this type of game. It was almost cozy, in a survival sim sort of way. So, if you're hankering for a bit of survival in an orc-infested fantasy setting, You could definitely do much worse than Realms of Arkania. See you in the next video.